You see, there is something that I really find is very interesting on, which is the fact that um, there are quality people in Africa, but these quality people never come to the position that they are supposed to be. Instead, we have what in Nigeria we call mumu, meaning almost like people that are too poor to execute certain task, but that the one that are given the task. And those people, they come to speak for the whole people. And they make everybody appear as if everybody is stupid. I think this is what the error that democracy was supposed to correct, in that the people need to choose who to represent them. But how can you choose if you are not enlightened to even know the difference between A and B? Of course, A and B, not just the letter, but to really know what it means, no? Anyway, we already have spoken about this before. I just want to point out that actually I do think that there are some quality people in Africa. Say, for example, in Nigeria. Anytime I see the Nigeria president come to speak, the Nigeria president Buhari come to speak as the president of my country, I feel ashamed that this is who we have. That this is, of all the more than 200 million in Nigeria, this is the best that Nigeria could pick. This is what we are talking about. That this is not the best to speak for Nigeria at this time. We needed somebody who understands what is going on. And of course, to be able to get that, then of course, it comes to what you are talking about, the societal education, the responsibility of each and every one of us to contribute to the enlightenment so that some people that are in the dark can see the light. And of course, they have always used the law to make sure that everything works in their interest. And coming back to the law again, the legal regime. Because, for example, in Nigeria, we have some lawyers that are very outspoken. Even in the time of the military regime, many of them have been outspoken. Some of them have been killed. We know they have been outspoken about the rule of law, about the abuse of the legal system in Nigeria. Some of them have paid with their life. So, are there these intelligent lawyers who understand what is going on, that are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that things change? Of course, we are fighting a big machine. It's not going to be very easy. How can we have a legal system that works for the people, not just for these few individuals in power? How can we do that?
Well, you have several kinds of intellectuals and lawyers. One is, of course, you have those who just do their job, period. You mentioned, does Nigeria really deserve President Buhari? You might find a lot of Nigerians who do not agree with you, but who also agree with you. The point is, those who go into the corridors of power are people who don't really care about themselves. Frankly, they take any risks to be there. Decent people, God-fearing people, they don't want to take these risks. For one, once you become the president or prime minister of a country, you're going to send your kids to war. They're going to die there. You have the monopoly of violence. You can imprison anyone that you want using the rule of law. You can kill anyone using the rule of law. And this has happened in Africa very often. This has happened also with the Western countries, where they have been sending their children for wars they don't even understand in the first place. The 9/11 attack by Al-Qaeda killed about 3,000 people in New York. But America lost more people probably in Afghanistan, trying to go and find the killer, trying to shape up the society out of Afghan society. Afghanistan is a society that has never been ruled by anybody since Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great. These are crude fighters who have their own community norms that the international community can only negotiate with them and try to bring them to the norms of the 21st century. Of course, within the limits of what's permitted within their religion. But the point that's coming up now is decent people don't go there. If you're sending an army to kill your own people, If you're sending your own police to kill your own people, then how can a decent person go there? That's why the intellectuals who are supposed to generate human development, human security, and of course, national security for African countries are not there. Most of them have a background in the military where they have been trained to kill. That is basically their training, and to save themselves. And therefore, these are the ones that always go into the leadership positions. And therefore, the transformation that you're looking for is to get people who have the vision, who can mobilize populations for the common good and the common will of the people. We've seen leaders in history who have done that. I think Gandhi is mentioned several times over how he transformed India. And of course, nothing has been for Gandhi himself. We've seen what he wore, we've seen what life he led, but he liberated India, and also he has become an example for the world's biggest democracy today. So many countries don't have this kind of leadership. In fact, you've seen the United States under President Trump. It went down literally in history to a point where a country has been run on Twitter, So these are issues that are very important to look in Africa, where, in the West, their challenge is not poverty. Their challenge is state power. Their challenge is more comfortable lives. Their challenge is how many stimulus packages people get out of the government. In Africa, the challenge we have is basic healthcare, basic food on the table, basic housing, and of course, human security in its right form, where people are protected from any kind of violence. That now includes climate change. Of course, people have to adapt to climate change, and governments have to come with adaptation programs where these populations that are now affected by climate change would adapt in a different way by building a different kind of livelihood. And Africa is also in a transition. The fastest growing economies in the world in 2019, 5 out of 10 were in Africa. And therefore, this is good news, you see, where we are seeing some progress. But on that progress, we need a transformation. And I think Nigeria, you mentioned, is an important country for Africa. It's not only the most populous nation, but I think Nigeria has the most educated people, probably more than the combined sub-Saharan Africa. And therefore, it's important that Nigeria takes the leadership in terms of economic development, in terms of governance development, in terms of international relations, and in terms of making sure that the people of Nigeria are happy with the kind of governance they have.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, we have come to the conclusion of this conversation today, and it has really been very interesting. We talked about law, of course, look at different angles of it and how the abuse of it has been very detrimental to our progress as a people. It has a lot of things are really involved in it. But there is an angle we didn't throw it today, which has to do with the foreign influence in how to maintain crocodile law, that they have, that they help them to maintain the system. But it's okay, that can be a conversation for another day. So to conclude this conversation, sir, what would be your final message to the people that have listened to this point? Of course, we're always concluding with a positive note that we do hope, we believe, we do strongly believe that things are going to change. Of course, they are not going to change by miracle. They're going to change by our effort, by our continuous and unrelenting effort. It's going to change by this. So what would be your conclusion?
Well, I think African intellectuals, African professional associations, African civil society leaders. I remember at one time we had an organization called FAVDO, Forum for African Voluntary Development Organizations, which was a network of about 10,000 civil society organizations around Africa. I frankly don't know what really happened to it now, but I have even served in this organization as a trustee. And this, I think, we had an office in Senegal for this. Eventually, when the donors stopped funding, I think it died, which shows you that it was not an initiative that's really coming from inside Africa. And therefore, this kind of networks are very important. And the problem even today is even the most important publications we have, you see at the bottom or on the side that it has been funded by this organization or that organization in Europe or the US. Most of the democracy studies that we have in this continent are funded from outside. And there is very little interest to do this. But now that we have African rich people like Dangote in Nigeria, they should have foundations that promote such an effort. Like Mo Ibrahim now has an institution doing this, but we need more of them. This is a continent of almost 1 billion people or more. This is a continent which has 2,000 languages, 2,000 cultures, probably 2,000 ethnic groups. And therefore, it's very important that we have this kind of institutions that really put pressure on states and promote civil society to a point where you have some kind of a peaceful transition, a peaceful competition for power among different sectors of the African population. It's not just having people with the legacy of who they are, which party they come from, but people who can transform society. And we have this kind of historical precedents in Africa. So it's very important that we have this kind of African think tanks that make a network with civil society organizations to be able to start the very slow process, but sure process to achieve what you call democratic governance the way we define it. Democracy is defined in a simple way. It's the rule of the people by the people of the people. But the point that we see is European democracy, we have Christian Democrats, we have Social Democrats, we have laissez-faire Democrats in the United States, we have a Communist Party in China that's running a laissez-faire economy, literally. And therefore, when you talk about democracy, it should be the will of the people. And the will of the people doesn't mean that the majority is going to decide to dominate the minority. That's where the republic comes in, where representatives ensure that the rights of the minority are respected according to a constitution that is written by the people themselves. And therefore, I think we should continue with this, where we converge the media, continental media associations, continental think tanks, and continental civil society organizations to put pressure on African governments. This will have tremendous voice on a single country, for example, that is having a serious problem. And we have several countries in Africa that are having serious problems today. They can be a voice of reason for the people that are being subjected to harassment, wars, conflicts, and famine in different parts of Africa.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate the time and the contribution. Again, it has been really, really educating. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.